But here I was suddenly later in 2015, starting to get a few clients coming in, starting to do some teaching for General Assembly, and having to figure out how I'm going to work from home and be productive, because it wasn't easy. It sounds easy and it sounds fantastic, and it just sounds like I can roll out of bed, make a coffee, and be at my desk 5 minutes later, and but it's not like that, especially early on. It really takes you some time to establish.
Ben Collins' story is an interesting one. He went from forensic accountant to creating and selling online courses about Google Sheets. Talk about niching down. But we talk about more than that. We do talk a lot about that, and that's incredibly interesting. But we also talk about being location independent and what it's like moving from an office to working from home with a family at home, and all sorts of other great stuff. There's a lot of really good stuff in this episode. So let's just dig right into it. Before we get started, I want to tell you about my online membership and community creator courses. So I know that when you want to learn something new, the natural thing you probably do is go to Google or YouTube. I do the same thing. And that's really great for one-off projects. I used a YouTube video to learn how to change a light switch in my house. But I am not a big fan of YouTube for learning new skills, right? Because there are lots of videos on every topic. But which one is best, and who do you trust? What order do you even watch the videos in, and will you get the support you need? These are all things that YouTube or other potentially free videos can't do for you. So I started creator courses a few years ago with the idea of just putting online courses out there, and I decided to morph it into a membership last year. So stop wasting your time hunting and pecking for the right learning resources and tools. Over at Creator Courses, you can become a member and take all of the courses that we have to offer included in that membership. And those courses focus on everything from just basic WordPress up to learning how to build websites without code, something you don't necessarily need to do in this day and age. And all of the courses are developed by me. And if you listen regularly, you know that I've been a developer for decades at this point. And I have lots of experience building websites. I'm a teacher at heart, and I've created courses for LinkedIn Learning and things like that. So on top of the courses, we're also a community, and members get access to forums and Slack and office hours with me. And so I just wanted to let you know about that and encourage you to join if you haven't already. Listeners of the show, exclusively for listeners of the show, you can save 15% on all memberships, including the lifetime membership. All you have to do is visit creatorcourses.com/build. That's creatorcourses.com/BUILD. Thanks so much. Now let's get on with the show. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of How I Built It, the podcast that asks, how did you build that? Today, my guest is Ben Collins of benlcollins.com. Today, we're going to be talking about location independence. I know that a lot of us are self-employed, and we may have that benefit. Ben's going to tell us how to make the most of that. Ben, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on your show, Joe.
Thank you so much for joining me. I see you have some... So the listeners don't know this. This is not a video podcast, but we do have the video turned on, and I see some great artwork in the background already. The solar system and the success iceberg. I really like both of those. So we're already off to a really good start. I like your office.
Cool. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Sweet. Sure. So we were connected basically because you are living a bit of a location-independent life. Is that right?
That's right. I work for myself and mostly work from home.
Awesome. So why don't we start with who you are and what you do and go from there?
Sure. So my name is Ben from England, but I've been living here in the States now for about 8 years. And I used to be a forensic accountant. So I worked in a corporate law firm with lawyers, spent a lot of time working with Microsoft Excel. And then around about 5 years ago, moved across to G Suite picked up Google Sheets and started building solutions for myself and clients using Google Sheets and writing about it, in a blog. And there really isn't much information out there about Google Sheets, or there wasn't rather 5 years ago. And so these blog posts kind of caught on and led to more client requests, and a little business just grew from there, really. And so today I have online courses, I teach workshops, and have a handful of clients still. And it's helping with primarily Google Sheets and G Suite.
Wow.
Work. Yeah.
So that's already insanely interesting. We're like 3 minutes in. So you used to be a forensic accountant. I think I know what that means, but what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. It means it's an interesting part of accounting, I guess. And, you work with, so what the work I was doing was sanctions-based cases. So it was businesses that had done work with countries that they were not supposed to be doing work with.
Wow.
So, business with Iraq or
or
Iran or somewhere. And they were being hauled in front of the DOJ and being told to explain themselves. And so as accountants, we would look through the transactions and try and find out, separate the good ones from the bad ones, to find out how big the problem was. And then the lawyers could build a case around that. So it was super interesting when we did our strategy sessions or we had meetings with clients and things. But then you'd then spend the next month looking through, 500,000 records. And that was, I guess, not as interesting. But I did learn all about data analysis, Microsoft Excel, SQL. And that's how I sort of really fell in love with the data analysis and technical side of things, which led me to, doing the job I do today.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds super cool. I'm sure like sifting through, my friend used to be an auditor for PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Right.
And,
Yep.
he would tell me things like, there could be like $1 million discrepancy and it didn't even matter with these companies. And that was interesting. I don't think the rest of it was very interesting to him. So
yeah. You have to ask where that $1 million went.
Yeah, right. I'm like, what do you mean? Like $1 million? Like the two columns are off by $1 million. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I guess for like a multi-billion-dollar company, it's like $100.
A rounding error.
Yeah, right. Cool. And so you kind of gained your chops for what you eventually went into doing client services and now products for, which is Google Sheets. This is really interesting to me because I'm not a heavy Google Sheets user, but I try to do interesting stuff in Google Sheets and I can never find the exact right formula or whatever to do what I want to do. So what's some of the stuff that you can like bend Google Sheets to your will doing?
So, all sorts really. It's really, what I love about it is that, or for me anyway, it's central to not only the client work and the teaching I do, but just for me to run my own business as well. So one example that's sort of a serious example, if you like, that's helped my business is that I get students to provide feedback for my courses through a Google form, which then goes into a Google Sheet. And it was becoming impossible for me to reply to all those people because I would open the Google Sheet and there'd be 100 rows of data of feedback. And I just can't spend 2 days emailing every one of those people because I'd have another 100 rows of data underneath it by then.
Yeah.
And so I built a little tool with Google Sheets and with AppScript, which is the coding language, that would write those 100 draft emails for me with all the feedback in and with some generic thank you type language up at the top and that kind of thing. And that would be tailored depending on the what the feedback was like. If it was good feedback, it was a very positive thing. If it was not so good feedback, it would be, I'm sorry to hear you were disappointed with the course, sort of. And then those 100 emails are just sitting in my draft folder of Gmail, so I can click and open them one by one and then add something personal and hit send. And it just allows me to fire through, say, 100 in an hour, maybe, rather than a day and a half. So that was something I built about a year ago, and that's really just helped me reply to feedback. I actually have a fair chunk now waiting in the draft folder I need to get to, but it's allowed me to keep mostly on top of that
Wow.
piece of my business.
That's wild. So like the feedback, I'm sure there's like a score, and like based on the score.
Actually, yeah, there's a score, and that's one factor. It also, I had it set up at one point to run, like there's a paragraph of text, and I can send it over to the natural language processing API of Google, and it gives me back a score of whether it was like they liked it or they didn't like it. But it wasn't perfect. So I ended up actually sort of cutting that piece out and just basing it on the score and keeping it pretty generic. But there's a lot of potential there. So it was fun to build as well.
Man, that's super cool. And so, so you got really good at this, and then you built a freelance business on top of this. So like, would like other accounting firms or like who is your client base?
Sure. So I did all the work in Excel, and that's sort of how I learned the craft. And then I actually started helping my wife was running her business on G Suite back in sort of 2013, 14, 15. And so I started helping her with the Google Sheets work. And that's how I sort of got into that world. And one of the big projects that we did was I built a dashboard in Google Sheets for her business for a digital sale that she's running. And then that became the very first blog post actually that I ever wrote. And then people started finding that, and it was marketing people initially and digital analysts and things saying, hey, can you build that dashboard or something similar for me? Actually, a little real estate firm was one of the first ones as well, because they wanted to have a dashboard like that to monitor what each of the agents were doing in terms of how many calls they were taking and how many sales they were making and that kind of thing. And it sort of went from there, actually. So I would say now it's about a third are digital marketers, about 1/3 are knowledge workers like accountants and business analysts and things whose companies are on G Suite. And then about 1/3 are a mix of educators and others, I guess.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm like blown away by this. It's awesome. And so then just to kind of keep with your story, your like personal story here, there was a point where you decided I should make educational material. Is that right?
There was. And from the Excel world that I'd come from, there were always a lot of bloggers and consultants and people making online courses in that world. So I'd seen that success in the Excel world and seen some of these business models already. And so I'd always been interested in that idea, because I've done some teaching when I was at college. I did a year of sort of mentoring / teaching to a small group of first-year students. And then I taught a tennis class for a couple of summers and things like that. So I enjoyed teaching. My mother was a teacher. And so I'd always had this idea one day of maybe I'll do some sort of kind of like an online course. But it had always just been nothing more than just a thought like that. And then I started doing this Google Sheets stuff and started working with the clients. And after about a year, I'd been building up the blog and realizing that, hey, there's an opportunity here, because there's no real material outside of what Google have created for Google Sheets at the moment. This is 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And
well, even today, it's like not great.
There's not as much. It's growing a lot, but it's still, it's still an opportunity there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, around about 2016, very beginning of 2016, actually, I said, okay, time to put my money where my mouth is and really see if this is, something that can be successful or not, and can I see it through, and would I enjoy doing it? So I decided to create a course about dashboards, because that's what most of my blog posts have been about, and it was quite popular and seemed to be, actually mainly because the blog posts had done well, it sort of chose that topic for me, because I thought, well, if I'm getting traffic to those posts, then there's more likely that I'll be able to sell a course than something totally brand new. So I thought it'll take me a couple of months to do, and I started at sort of spring of 2016, and I think it was a year until I actually launched it. Because you know what these things are like when it's something new. I had to learn the technology of recording, which tools to use, how to do screencasts well. I had to build the materials. Then I got busy with client work, et cetera, the usual stuff.
Yeah. So. You're singing the song of many. It looks like you're using Teachable for your online courses. Is that right?
I am. Cool. That's right. So actually, that's one of the other choices early on was, I was looking at I'd only ever heard of Udemy,
Mhm.
I think, when I first came up with this course idea. So I just figured I'd do that. Then started to do some research and found out about the way the Udemy model works versus the platforms like Teachable or Thinkific and things, where they're more like, a WordPress for course creators.
Yeah, they're
where
more
you build your own
nice to
platform.
their content creators.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest difference, the one thing I just kept in mind was Udemy, they're Udemy students and I'm providing course materials.
Right.
Whereas on my own platform, they're my students and I can contact them directly, get their emails and build a business on that. And really, once I'd done that, understood that nuance, that difference, then it was an obvious choice to go with Teachable for the long haul, even if it meant that, it was on me then to do all the marketing and build that audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, longtime listeners of the show will know exactly how I feel about Udemy, but I don't have many kind thoughts about them because I am a course creator and I created a course for them and it didn't work out in a very spectacular way. I just don't like the way they run their business and I don't think they're kind to their content creators.
Yeah, I think that unless you become one of the sort of mega stars with the gigantic volume, then it's pretty tough when they sell your course, which you've taken 6 months to create, for $10.
Right.
And because of it's an affiliate link as well, you end up getting $2.50 or something.
Right.
When someone sort of explained that, I thought, well, I'd rather sell 10 courses at $100 myself than $100 at $2.50 or whatever there.
Yeah, that's exactly that's exactly right. And the quality of student that you'll get on your own, people would essentially reach out to me and be like, "Give me your course for free on Udemy," and I'm like, "If you can't pay $10 for this course, this is not. I don't think you're ready for it."
Yeah.
But this is neither here nor there. That's not a Udemy. This is not a Udemy bash session. That's the second time I've said that in an interview for this season, by the way. So maybe I'll have to do an episode.
There's people who've had huge success there. So I think, and it can work, if you're people, it can be a good way to grow an audience if you don't have one of the things. It wasn't for me.
This episode is brought to you by FreshBooks. Do you remember when you started your small business? It was no small feat. It took lots of late nights, early mornings, and the occasional all-nighter. Bottom line, you've been insanely busy ever since. So why not make things easier? Well, my friends at FreshBooks have the solution. FreshBooks invoicing and accounting software is designed specifically for small business owners. It's simple, intuitive, and keeps you way more organized than a dusty shoebox filled with crumbled receipts. As a side note, I actually told my accountant the first time that I used the shoebox method, and his face turned white. But in actuality, FreshBooks was one of the first things I bought when I started my business. I've been a FreshBooks user since 2009. It's easily the best accounting and invoice software for small business owners like us. Create and send professional-looking invoices in 30 seconds, and then get them paid 2 times faster with automated online payments. Nothing is better than sending out an invoice and getting it paid in the same day. That's happened for me with FreshBooks. You can also file expenses even quicker and keep them perfectly organized for tax time. And the best part is that FreshBooks grows alongside your business. So you'll always have the tools you need when you need them, without ever having to learn the ins and outs of accounting. Now, there are a lot of features on this list I have here to talk about, but I'm going to pick 2 of my favorites. The first is late payment reminders. They are clutch. It's one less thing that I need to worry about when making sure I get paid. I don't have to keep track of exactly when I sent the invoice, and if I already sent a follow-up email, or whether or not they viewed the email. All of that is taken care of inside FreshBooks. The other feature I really like is the automated expenses. I connect my business credit card to FreshBooks, and my expenses automatically get imported. They are all there, ready for me and my accountant to review. It makes tax time easier for both of us. And it's no secret that I love automation, and these 2 features make my life a lot easier. After doing things by hand, FreshBooks is worth the price of admission just for those 2 things. So join the 24 million people who have used FreshBooks. You can try it for 30 days for free. No catch, no credit card required. Go to freshbooks.com/builtit and enter how I built it in the How Did You Hear About Us section to get started. That's freshbooks.com/builtit. That's built with a T. Thanks so much to FreshBooks for supporting the show. And now let's get back to it. So you got your whole course stack set up. You're running a completely digital business. And so that enabled you to be location independent. So let's set the stage for that too. When did you decide to be kind of like a digital, I don't know if digital nomad is the right term, but location independent?
Yeah, so it was end of 2014, I had left that accounting job. And so starting really in 2015, I was thinking, okay, I want to do my own thing. And actually, initially, I wanted to be a web developer. So spent the first half probably of 2015 trying to do that. And that was not really working, but I was working from home. So I would either be in coffee shops or just from the sort of home office. Mm-hmm. And then right around about that same time is when all of the Google Sheets business side picked up and I started getting clients. So it meant I didn't have to go back to doing my old job.
Nice. I
could keep rolling, with going the flow. And so, I'd never really set out to be location independent because I was hoping to apply to web development jobs and just end up working in another office but doing web development instead of accounting. But here I was suddenly later in 2015, starting to get a few clients coming in, starting to doing some teaching for General Assembly and having to figure out how I'm going to work from home and be productive because it wasn't easy.
Yeah, it's if you're not used to it, especially, it's really tough.
Yeah, it sounds easy and it sounds fantastic and it just sounds like I can roll out of bed, make a coffee and be at my desk 5 minutes later and, but it's not like that, especially early on. It really takes you some time to establish a good work routine. Yep. You have to get your office set up so you're productive there. You have to, set up your computer now because your home computer is also your work computer. Mm-hmm. So you've got to make sure that you're not just firing up Netflix or, you open your screen and the Netflix movie from the last night is still showing. You're like, I'll just finish it off before I start work. And, so it's just, and it takes time. You have to be disciplined. And I think you have to surround yourself with people who support you, most importantly, because otherwise you're going to go crazy or just not achieve anything and then feel terrible at the end of the week.
Yeah, I that is such a great point. Surround yourself with people who support you. I remember distinctly not really getting that when I was working, like living at home at my parents' house after college. Because I've worked from home for basically my whole life, except for 3 years when I worked at my alma mater. And my parents didn't get it. They're like, hey, can you come up here and help me? And it's the middle of the day. And I'm like, I'm effectively at work.
Yeah. You have to imagine I'm at the office now.
Yeah, right. Of course, if they walked in and saw me on Facebook or something, they'd be like, I thought you were at work. And I'm like, I'm taking a break. But conversely, my wife totally understands. She's a nurse, so sometimes she's home during the day, and she totally understands if my schedule is going to be really bogged down or I really need to focus. She'll take our daughter out somewhere for a few hours. So it's having that support is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, my wife was extremely patient with me early on, and she'd worked from home as well and built her own business, so she knew what it was all like, and she would just gently encourage me in the right direction to sort of build those good work habits. So you need someone who is going to understand that it's a transition. It's going to take a little bit of time at first. Yeah. But also, push you as well, give you a kick at the backside when it's needed, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want that to sound like I was bashing on my parents because they eventually got it and they're like, well, then close your door, or fine, we understand from 9 to 5, you're not home. But when you're home, be home, right? When you're home from the office, you have to help around the house. And I'm like, yeah.
That's the flip side of it, of course, is you finish work at, or let's say you close down your computer at 5. It's really important then that you can switch over to the home mode so you can spend time with your kids and your wife and or whoever, and not be thinking about work or not be checking your phone. And that takes effort as well. You establish all these good work routines, but then your work, it's only just upstairs, and that's when you need to build a good routine for also being present.
Yeah. On the Focused podcast, David Sparks and Mike, name is slipping my mind, but they kind of talk about having like a shutdown routine at the end of the day where like,
yeah, that's really smart. Actually.
Yeah. David Sparks has like a bunch of automations where like his lights turn red and he knows like it's time to close down, and he like journals at the end of the day. I've like my shutdown routine now is kind of like journaling at the end of the day and closing down my computer and then telling my voice assistant that I don't want to activate right now to shut off the office and all the lights turn off. And like that's I know it's the end of my day. It's really interesting. If I don't do that, I find myself thinking about work even when I'm like upstairs. So crazy. But so definitely having a good routine and supportive people. So where did you live in 2014, say?
So in 2014, my wife and I were living in Arlington, Virginia, so just outside of Washington, D.C. Yeah. So that was, I love D.C. actually. It's a great city. It's where I first came to America.
Nice.
And we were there for 5 years.
Wow.
And then my wife's business, she sold that business during that time and went to work for so her client bought the business and she went to work there. And then eventually that moved us down to Florida. So we went down to Florida for a couple of years, and I was still independent. So I was working from home. And then because we had young children, one of whom was at home because he was under the age of 1, it was just too hard for me to record courses with a 1-year-old in the house.
Yeah.
So I ended up I rented an office for the first time for a year in St. Petersburg, just a little one-person office in a big building.
St. Pete.
Yep.
Did you go to any Yankee spring training games there?
No, I didn't actually. I did go to some of the Rowdies soccer games in the baseball stadium. That was really fun. Nice. That was really cool. It's a really cool city, actually. We're not Florida people because we love the mountains and we love hiking and things more than the beaches. But St. Pete's a really cool city.
Yeah.
It was a sort of a challenging couple of years because we had a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old.
Wow.
So it's like the really intense phase. My wife was unbelievably busy with her job. And then I was still trying to build my business as well. So it was a pretty intense couple of years, but
wow.
So, but
yeah, wow. So that's wild. So you were down in St. Pete. You have children. I feel like it's uncouth to ask that, so I'm glad you brought it up. Because that throws a little bit of a wrench in the location a complication into the location independence, right?
Yeah, it's so I mentioned that the wrinkle it created for me was that having a baby in the house full time with a nanny was just too noisy for me to be able to record these online courses. Yeah. And that led me to say, okay, well, can I just find a single room where I can shut the door in an office building, and then I can do my recording there. And that worked really well actually for that year. But certainly, children, they change everything. You have to just plan everything a lot more and whatever. But it gets easier for sure as they grow up. Mine are 4 and 2 now.
Okay.
And so it's already a lot easier than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In that respect.
Great. So after Florida, where did you go from there? And like, you could be as vague as possible. I'm not trying to like map your movements, but I'm just
tracking it.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because my wife came to the end of her contract with the company that she was working for in Florida. And so sort of earlier this year, sort of in the spring, beginning of the spring, she had finished working in the office in Florida. So we were no longer tied to Florida. Okay. So we decided to move back to the Washington, D.C. region. Okay. Because she has family there and we both just love this area. And so we've ended up in a little mountain town called Harper's Ferry outside of Washington, D.C.
Nice.
And we've got the Appalachian Trail running past the door.
Yeah, that's great. I'm outside Philadelphia, so I'm familiar with like the East Coast area.
Yeah. And we're loving it here actually. And because now effectively we're both working from home, we don't need to be anywhere particular. But it was interesting. It sort of, we'd been planning for a little while where we might go and things, and we'd been scouring all of the lists of best mountain towns, and a lot of them are out west, or in the Rockies.
Sure.
And I love it out there as well, but it's also it's a long way from her family.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're already away from my family, we didn't want to be living away from both families, because then we'd spend all of our time just traveling.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to stay East Coast, and so. Yeah, we had sort of 3 or 4 places, I think, on the East Coast, and we just visited each one, or one of us did, and then we just sort of liked Harper's Ferry and rolled the dice and went for it.
Yeah, that's
and so we've been here about 7 or 8 months, and loving it now.
Nice. So you have a 2 and a 4-year-old.
That's right.
Is schooling a factor when are you both run businesses, so. I don't know if homeschooling is a factor for you, or if you're looking for like a good public school, but is that something that you put into your decision making?
It is. So they're both now at a preschool.
Okay.
Together, the same one. And, my wife is doing the lion's share at the moment of sort of running the household, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about everything, and we plan everything, and we try to distribute the home chores, because it's a full-time job to run a house, especially when you have young children, it changes as soon as you go from having no children to having children.
Yeah, absolutely.
You really have to get on top of those things. And so what we try to do with each other is, support each other. And so at the moment, my wife's really being great in supporting me to sort of build up my business with these courses and things, because I think she was ready for a break after the Florida job.
Yeah.
So she said, okay, I want to spend some more time with the kids, and happy to take on that household side of things for a while, so you can do your stuff. And then, at some point in the future, we'll sit down and rebalance it again and just figure that out. So I think that, this plays back into the working from home thing, that you have to, separate out again your work and home balance. You have to sort of find out where those boundaries are and who's responsible for what, and just honestly, just communicate really well about these things, because, the worst thing you can do is let things build up and not talk about them. And then there's this resentment builds in, because you feel like, say if I go down and I grab my breakfast and then just grab a coffee and then come back upstairs. And meanwhile, my wife feels like she has to do the laundry before she can start her day. Then it's like, well, that's not fair.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but at least it's fair if we've decided that's the way it's going to do, because maybe, I'll do something else in the evening, so she gets some time there, or, so I think just making sure that you have talked out what the plan is. And then, maybe like I said, at the moment, certainly at the moment, my wife is doing a lot of the care for the boys, taking them to school and that sort of stuff, taking them to doctor's appointments. Mm-hmm. But in the future, we'll probably try and flip it back over when she's at a pinch point with work, where she really wants to have more time to focus on the work side.
Today's episode is brought to you by Smile and their product, Text Expander. Save time typing and boost your productivity with Text Expander. I'm all about automation, and Text Expander is a great way to get started with automation. It allows you to create your own snippets for repetitive text you tend to use everywhere. Add the text, create a snippet, and boom, save precious time and keystrokes. One of my favorite snippets is for my address. So instead of typing out my full address and risking typos, I simply type $ADDR, and Text Expander does the rest, filling in my full address for me. I also have snippets for my street, my city, and my zip code. But that's not all Text Expander does. With its advanced snippets, you can create fill-ins, pop-up fields, and more. You can even use JavaScript or AppleScript. Another one of my favorite and most used snippets is when I type PPT. That will take whatever text I have on my clipboard and convert it to plain text. So I'm no longer fighting formatting when I copy from a Word document, a Google Doc, or a plain HTML page, like a website. I also use it for common links, email messages, which I can completely customize with fill-ins and drop-down menus, and even date calculations. I'm currently writing a book, And TextExpander has been instrumental with that. TextExpander is available on macOS, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad, so pretty much anywhere you do computing. If you've been curious about trying TextExpander or automation in general, now's the time. As a listener, you can get 20% off your first year. Just visit textexpander.com/podcast and let them know How I Built It sent you. That's textexpander.com/podcast for 20% off your first year. And now, back to the show. I think you raise a really good point for, especially if you have a family. Like when I was like single and on my own, like I would just like go visit my brother in Orlando. He works at Disney World. And I would just like work there for a week or whatever, right? Like it was great. Can't do that anymore. Like I'm married. I have a child, a 2.5-year-old. My wife is expecting our second in July.
Okay. Congratulations.
So thank you very much. We're like super excited. Actually, as we record this, you're like one of the first people I told, but it's coming out after I'm telling everybody. So
I'm honored.
Yeah, awesome. So, but I mean, but it's a lot to think about, right? When I went out on my own and started my own business in 2016, I left my agency job. She was insanely supportive. And likewise, when I knew like she had to work, she's a nurse, so she works 12-hour shifts. And if there was a time where like we didn't have a babysitter, like I knew I could juggle my schedule around a little bit to watch Teresa before we put her in daycare and stuff like that. So, having that regular conversation, because like the flexibility, like you said, is like a double-edged sword. It's like, I can just like knock off in the afternoon and go to a movie or whatever, but like I also need to get work done. Yeah,
absolutely. And once you do have children, then you have to be ruthlessly efficient and prioritize your work, because you know if you decide to watch a movie for the afternoon, you're not going to get those few hours back later in the day. Because you want to spend that time with your children, obviously. And then you want to help your partner, and then also by the time you get the children to bed at 8:30, whenever, and you finish washing up and all that sort of stuff, you're way too exhausted to work well. Or
that has actually been like such an interesting change for me, because like I'm a programmer. And like programmers notoriously are night owls. And so like, I'd be like, oh yeah, if I don't get something done, I'll just, wait till Teresa goes to bed or wait till my wife goes to bed and I'll just code. I am so tired at the end of the day now. It's like when my wife works, I pick up my daughter and then we play, and she has boundless energy because she's a child. And like by the time it's time for bed, I'm like, my wife's going to be home soon and I'm super tired. I'm not going to I can't do any work. My brain is mush. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. I think like, aside from just focusing on the work stuff, that's like auxiliary things that small business owners, freelancers, people who don't necessarily need to go to an office to work need to think about. Maybe we can kind of end here with some tips that you've picked up from being location independent. Things that you found helpful in increasing your productivity.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you 3 techniques or 3 things I do each week that have really helped me. So number 1 is I try to, on a Sunday night, just look at my Trello board. I use Trello and Google Calendars to sort of organize my weeks, but I try to set up my week on the Sunday night before I turn up to my desk on Monday morning. So that, come Monday morning when I sit down at my desk, because when you work for yourself, nobody's there to tell you, here's what you're supposed to do today. Yeah. You've got to figure that out yourself. So if you can kind of, do that in advance and be that person, so that you get there on Monday morning and you just look at Trello or your Google Calendar or whatever you use, and it says, first thing Monday morning, 1 hour, write your blog post, and then, then it just means you can start. You're not procrastinating. So that's really, just spending half an hour on a Sunday night to be organized for the whole week really pays off, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Before you get on to your other 2 tips, I just want to expand on this. I used to be like very against working at all on the weekends. Yeah. Because like I used to just work all the time, like before I had a family. But like that, like half hour, like you said, prepping probably saves me like 3 hours on a Monday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just sets you up for the week, I think, really well, because you're sort of, you think, oh, I'm now excited about the week, because hopefully you are excited because it's your own project, it's your own work now.
Yeah.
And so, if someone had said when I was an accountant, can you spend 1 hour on a Sunday night answering, looking through emails and preparing a week, I'd be like, I don't want to do that. This is my Sunday night. It's precious. But now once the boys have gone to bed, I'm quite excited to say, what's coming up this week? I've got this calls on Tuesday and one on Thursday. I want to do this. I want to, finish this project. And just to sort of, even if you really don't even write anything down, but you just mentally have prepared for the week, I think it's, that definitely helps a lot. It pays off.
For sure. Because like you said, there's nobody else to tell you what your priorities are, right? Like on Monday morning, my boss would come into my office and say like, I need you to work on this today. And then like an hour later, like, I actually work on this. But now you're your own project manager.
Yep. So, you have to be ready to sort of crack the whip a little bit and start and get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I'm sorry, I interrupted, I think, what was going to be another really good tip probably.
Well, so the next one was to be, and it sort of actually ties in a little bit there, is that when I first started, I always focused on having to get my 40 hours in or whatever you decide to do. And it's only really over the few years I realized that doesn't make the least bit of difference. Focus on instead my goals for the week of, this week I want to reach out to 5 new clients, and I want to publish 1 blog post, and I want to finish project X that I'm working on or something. And then just do what you need to do, whatever you have to do to get that through that list. And as you get better, or more used to doing that, your estimates get really accurate. So you generally, will get through 9 out of 10 of them. Mm-hmm. And if you need to start piling on a little bit more, you can do that. If you're obviously being too optimistic, then you can bring them back a little bit. But I think that the sort of goals, not hours, and even in some ways, the habits and actions is replacing goals as the new way to work, to sort of just really just focus on what you're doing, but not sort of focusing on the hours. Because then, for example, I try and do something active every day to get away from my desk, go for a hike, a walk, a run. And you think, okay, well, I'm not working for an hour then. I should really be at my desk because every hour counts. But doing that 1 hour of physical activity away from my desk, I come back full of ideas, or I've solved problems in my head, or decided how to answer that email that I couldn't approach. And that's a hugely worthwhile hour for the business, for the day. So that's an example of, goals, not hours sort of focus.
For sure. I love that. Like I realized that I would kind of get into like that post-lunch slump.
Yep.
And so like I try to go for a walk every day after lunch. And like you said, that hour, again, saves me a couple of hours, because it's like just sitting at my desk, like willing myself to work. Or
it's not worth it. You can go for a walk and you solve all your work problems in your head as you walk.
Yeah. And like I feel much better, and I'm getting some exercise in, which is another thing that could be hard to do if you never have to leave your house. Exactly.
Yeah, totally. And then the very last one is a much more practical tip, which helped me again early on when it was too easy to be distracted by Twitter and Facebook and all the other places that we go, was to use a blocker on my browser. It's called Cold Turkey Blocker. And you could just list a whole bunch of websites you wanted to not have access to during certain times. So I could say from 9 till midday every day, I'm not allowed to look at any social channels at all. And then again, from 2 till 5, I can't look at any social channels at all. And even my emails, actually, I put into there for a little while, because then it means I just have a block where I have to focus on doing my work. But then at lunchtime, if I want, while I'm eating my lunch or whatever, I can go and, browse around on Twitter and chat to people on Twitter and things, and not feel like I'm being distracted from my real work then. So it just helped me to, just stop procrastinating and looking at all of those kinds of sites. Because every time you jump over to Twitter for a minute or two, it's really costing you probably 5 or 10 minutes from the lost focus. So
yeah, for sure. The mental
switching, costs.
Yeah, there's a heavy tax there of context switching.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, I will link that in the show notes for sure. I'm checking it out, and it looks like there's a free and paid version, and the scheduling is really cool. So I will say, if you're running macOS Catalina, you might have access to some of this stuff in the new screen time options. But if you want something that is a little bit more stats driven and a little bit more, we'll say heavy handed. It looks like this is.
Yeah, I think that's the best thought, really. When you're procrastinating, you're really distracted and you're having a hard time focusing, you need to do something drastic and just block all of those places you like to go and browse, block your favorite news readers, block Reddit if you want, whatever it takes to just put you in front of that blank piece of paper and or whatever it is you do and just get things done.
For sure. So. That's awesome. So to sum up, the 3 tips are try to plan your week, look at your week ahead on a Sunday night. I'll also add that I do this at the end of each of my days. I'll write down the 3 tasks I want to accomplish the next day.
Just same idea, really.
Yeah, right. So I'm not coming and going, what am I going to do today? Focus on goals for the week. I think this is so great because, like, first of all, if you're self-employed, either because you want to try to make like millions of dollars that you wouldn't make in a 9-to-5, and then you're probably working a lot, or you want freedom. And if you focus on your goals and you don't just say, I have to work 8 hours a week, if you accomplish your goals quickly, then you can, knock off and go watch Star Wars, which is coming out in a week as we record this. And then the cold turkey blocker. It looks like it's a Mac and a Windows app. Again, I'll link that in the show notes over at howibuilt.it. Ben, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I do have one more question for you, and that is, do you have any trade secrets for us?
Trade secrets for in what sense? For
just any. So I like to say that any general lesson that you've learned maybe the hard way that you want to impart on somebody.
I think that the biggest differentiator between the people who are successful with their own freelance careers and those that maybe can't get it to work and end up going back to a normal job or whatever is just persevering and sticking with it, because it's going to take a long time to build, and nobody's going to notice initially or care about what you write or what you do. And so you've got to just stick with it and believe in yourself and believe in your systems and keep going.
Yeah. I love that. Nothing more to say. That is a perfect trade secret. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on the show, Joe. It was a really great conversation. And people can find me at benlcollins.com and on Twitter at benlcollins. They're probably the best 2 places.
All right, awesome. I will link those 2 links and everything else we talked about in the show notes over at howibuilt.it. Ben, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Joe, and have a great day.
Thanks so much to Ben for joining us this week. Again, like I said at the top of the show, lots of really good stuff. His story is really, really interesting to me, and I think it's a really good path for if you want to start selling online courses. It's a little bit of a long game, but you really start to understand who wants to learn from you, who your target audience is, and then the main points that you should maybe cover in an online course versus the more specific questions and use cases that you get from, say, consulting. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say his most important piece of advice in this episode was to surround yourself with people who support you. If you're a longtime listener of the show, you'll know that when I left my full-time job back in 2017 rather, shortly after my daughter was born, I would not have been able to do that with any amount of confidence unless I had the support of my wife, which was integral to me being able to start the business. And of course, I had the support of my in-laws and my own parents as well, which again, is I was 31 at the time, even at 31, like that kind of support is really important. So I'm going to say that that's the most important advice he gave, but lots of other great tips too. So thanks again to Ben for joining us this week. If you want to get the resources, everything that we talked about, you can head over to howibuilt.it/156 for the show notes and more. I don't often mention this, but there's a full transcript over there too. So if there's a point that maybe one of us made that you want to go back and read, it's there, the full verbatim transcript. So check that out as well. Thanks to this week's sponsors, Text Expander and FreshBooks. Those are, I've got to tell you, they are two tools I am so happy to have in my life because they make my job easier. And the fact that they are sponsoring this podcast just makes me warm inside because those are truly two products I can absolutely vouch for. So definitely check them out and say thanks for sponsoring the show. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe and maybe give us a rating and review over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about my online courses, we talked about all sorts of online courses today. If you want to learn about mine and the membership, you can do that over at the show notes link. Again, that's howibuilt.it/156. Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us over here at How I Built It. And until next time, get out there and build something.